A rich black man pretends to be a regular customer at one of his high-end shops, but the owner of the store doesn't know about it, doesn't recognize the man, and says racist things about the black man. The next day, the owner is shocked when he recognizes the man, gets a call from the company, and sees the black guy again. John Bennett is standing at the corner of Fifth Avenue and Fifth Avenue. The fall breeze ruffled the hem of his casual shirt, adding to the noise of New York City. With his black jacket down and his baseball cap pulled down over his face, John observed the people passing by the glass-fronted building. The high-end store he owned was in a tall building with clean lines that screamed elegance. Above the front door, the store's name appears in gold. The store's fancy decor was visible as customers came and went with their bags swinging. John took a deep breath and stepped forward, shoving the heavy glass door open. A soft chime rang out. He announced his arrival inside the store, which had smooth marble floors and soft plush chairs. There were plush chairs and carefully set up displays of high-end jewelry and fashion. The air smelled like expensive cologne. Soft jazz music was playing in the background, making the air feel warm and inviting. Jonathan had made this place friendlier, where luxury and comfort met, but today, dressed in dark pants, sneakers, and a plain black shirt, he felt like he didn't belong there. He didn't look like the store's usual customer in his jacket. That was the point. He wanted to see how people would react. His title or standing did not factor into their treatment. He had done this before, but today was different. Today was different. He was in his hometown checking on one of his favorite shops. John stopped by. A case filled with designer watches drew his attention. He appreciated the craftsmanship of each watch and was well versed in its intricate details. He assisted in selecting the styles, but today he was just another customer. John looked over and saw the store's franchise owner, Richard Coleman, standing near the counter. Coleman was in his mid-50s. He was conversing with a woman wearing a smart suit that appeared a bit too snug around the waist. His grey hair was starting to fall out. As John stepped closer to the watch screen, he was wearing a luxury suit, spoke in a low, polite tone, and had a practiced smile on his face. Richard looked at him, and his smile turned into a small frown. John claimed not to notice, and he picked up the phone. On the screen, a sleek silver watch with a leather strap caught his eye. He took it in his hands and admired its beauty. "Wait, excuse me," J.N. said in a light voice. "Could you tell me more about this watch?" Richard walked up to him. He looked at Jonathan slowly and carefully, examining his casual clothes and baseball cap. His face showed that. Richard, one of our limited edition models, spoke in a reserved, almost dismissive tone. His speech had a clipped, empty tone. "It may not be what you're looking for due to its exclusivity." John kept his smile on. "Oh, why is that?" Richard's eyes got narrow. "It's a costly, high-end item. Perhaps something less expensive would pique your interest." It made John a little mad that he knew Richard didn't know him, but it was clear what he was assuming when he spoke. John chose to go a step further. "I like high-end pieces," he said quietly. "What makes this one unique?" Richard sighed, seemingly resigned to a mundane task. "It was made by, he is among the top watchmakers in Switzerland. The materials are the best, and the work is unmatched. There are only a very few of these collector's items left in the whole world." J.N. nodded carefully. "It sounds cool to hold the watch. How much does it cost?" Richard hesitated briefly, observing John's expression. "It costs $122,000, he finally said, giving away a hint of whether he could afford it or not. "I understand your reluctance, but as I previously mentioned, we have alternative options that could better suit your budget." John's smile stayed on, but he felt a familiar kind of anger inside as he put the watch back in its case and looked at Richard with care. Richard's eyes lit up with anger as he said, "I'd need to see proof of payment first." "We don't have any. Someone could just walk out with our best pieces." John's face didn't change, but he was losing his temper. "I understand that it's against shop policy to ask a customer if they can pay before closing the deal." Richard's tone got angry. "There's no question about it. We have to protect the integrity of our business and keep up our image. We can't just let it slide. Anyone handle our goods?" John gazed at Richard for a brief moment before turning his gaze away and nodding slightly. He said softly, "Understand," and John turned away from the display case. As he approached the door, he sensed a presence. Richard silently judged the man as he peered at him from behind. John opened the door and he stepped back into the cool city air. His mind was already going over what had just happened. He watched to see what his stores were really like without him being there, which he did, but what he saw was, as he stood on the pavement, blending back into the stream, a disappointing anger began to build under his calm exterior. Observing the passing people, John realized that this visit would not conclude here. He had witnessed enough to understand that action was necessary. He stood outside the store for a moment, collecting his thoughts. He had come here to watch, but what he saw and felt changed his mind. What he had seen so far made him very angry. He took a deep breath, turned around, and walked inside. The soft chime rang again as he stepped into the room to determine if this was a one-time event or part of a trend. This time, instead of looking around the store, he went straight to the section where Richard Coleman had been. Richard was still standing near the bar and checking his phone when he saw John coming up behind him. His eyes got very narrow. Jonathan saw that Richard's face showed the same mix of indifference he had shown earlier. Feeling irritated and superior, John took a deep breath and reminded himself of his goal. He then walked up to a display. John looked at the dark, well-fitted coat and ran his fingers over the soft fabric. It was a wonderful fall coat. He picked it up and held it out in front of him to get a better look. "Excuse me," JN said in a quiet, polite voice. Richard put down his phone and looked up at John's face. "Could you tell me more about this coat?" he asked. After giving it some thought, he set down his phone and walked over to the fake smile. "One of ours," Richard said in the same clipped tone as before. "Premium items." "The item is made of Italian wool and is from our newest collection." John nodded in agreement, glancing at the coat and remarking, "That's quite nice. How much is it?" Richard's smile grew as he said, "It's priced," he said, "at 2,500 wash," emphasizing each word as if he were addressing a young child. "Only our most significant customers should handle this type of merchandise. We don't display it for everyone to see." John raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. "I understand that you keep certain items out of the reach of your regular customers." Richard's face darkened, and he informed our regular customers of their payment options. He could have said, "We serve a specific group of people here, those who value quality and have the money to pay for it." John took his time putting the coat back on the hanger. He felt his anger rising again, but he had to keep going. He kept his cool, which I liked. He spoke smoothly, and I think I might be interested in this coat. Richard's eyes flashed with anger and shock. He stepped closer and lowered his voice, as if he were trying to get his point across. Richard said, with a hint of snobbery in his voice, "I don't mean to. I don't mean to offend, but you might want to check out some of our cheaper choices. There's no point in wasting time on things that aren't worth it, that are too far out of your range." John's patience was quickly running out. He looked at Richard and spoke in a firm voice. John replied, "You don't know my range because of how I look. That's not beneficial business." Practice. Richard's face tightened further as he scrutinized John closely, clearly passing judgment on him once more. Richard spoke slowly, as if he was speaking to someone unfamiliar with the rules. No one should come in and touch our most valuable things. It's about protecting the brand. John looked at Richard with anger in his eyes. Now that he understood the importance of protecting the brand, John stated that judging people based solely on their appearance was not appropriate. You build trust or respect. Richard crossed his arms and slouched. Our customers like being able to get what they want. Nothing should be touched by just anyone here. It's about the experience, setting, and what John took a slow breath and looked at Richards with his eyes fixed on her. "What makes us different?" he asked. Richard shrugged. He crossed his arms and said, "I think I know my customers. I am the one who keeps the store honest, and no one else can." JN didn't respond immediately. He looked away. As they walked around the store, taking in the displays, the neatly arranged goods, and the other customers who were starting to notice how tense things were between them. He then turned back to Richard and said, "Thank you for your time." "Cool. I think I've seen all I need to see." John didn't wait for a response. He just turned around and left. A soft bell rang as he walked out the door and into the cool air of the city. This time, it was JN. He didn't linger on the curb. Instead, he walked quickly down the street, his mind racing. What he had seen and heard was wrong. As a businessman and a person who believed in being kind to others, he had come to see that John's jaw tightened, recalling Richard's patronizing demeanor while discussing the inner workings of his shop. Being rude. It wasn't just a coat or a watch. It was about the principles John had built his business on. There were clear violations of values in the store, and as John walked, his anger turned into he was determined and knew what he had to do today. He felt that his superiors had treated him like any other customer and judged him. Without a second thought, he planned to return tomorrow as John Bennett, not as John Bennett, the buyer. Bennett was the owner, and things were going to change. JN spent the night going over every word of the conversation in his head. Richard got stronger by crying over his anger, which changed into a clear plan. He would go back to he wanted to learn more about Richard's behavior and determine if it extended beyond his personal experiences with how Richard treated him. How did he treat others? JN was determined to find out. He redressed in his casual attire of jeans and sneakers and proceeded. John walked back into the high-end store wearing the same black jacket. The bell above the door rang to let the staff know he was there. There were fewer people in the store than the day before, so Jonathan went straight to the jewelry area. This time, a glass case filled with a variety of diamond bracelets and chains caught his attention. The soft lighting illuminated them, and John tucked their price tags out of sight. As he looked at a very complicated band, he caught Richard standing in the corner of his eye. Sarah Moore was standing close to the back of the store, talking to a young woman who looked worried. It was Sarah Moore. The deputy manager was nodding along with Richard's words, moving nervously with a clipboard while John strained to listen. Listen to parts of their conversation. "I don't care if he's a possible customer." Richard's voice was low but firm. "Observe him closely." Sarah looked over at John, and her face showed a mix of fear and concern. With compassion, she briefly met John's gaze before averting his gaze. John claimed not to notice and kept going. He understood that Richard was warning his staff to be cautious due to the presence of gold. This realization became stronger. John decided to talk to Richard again, but this time he would find out how biased Richard really is. A young woman approached him, holding a diamond necklace and gesturing for a salesperson to assist him. She was polite, but, "Good morning, John," the salesperson said with a warm smile. "Could you tell me more about this necklace?" She glanced over her shoulder at Richard, who was now closely observing them. She thought for a moment and then turned back to John. "It is one of our signature pieces," she said in a low voice. "We craft it with the finest diamonds, set in platinum, and its cost is substantial." At $15,000, John nodded and said, "That's beautiful. Could I get a closer look?" Before the employee had a chance to respond, Richard walked over and glanced at Stern. "Is there a problem here?" Richard questioned the assistant instead of John. "No problem," John replied. Richard's eyes lit up as he said, "I was just wondering about this necklace. I'd like to look at it more." He said, in an annoyed, condescending voice, "I don't think that's necessary. As I said before, there are other areas that could be more suitable for you." John kept his eyes on her and wouldn't let go. He expressed his clear interest in this one by saying, "I'd like to see how it looks." Richard crossed his arms over his chest. "Thin. Our strategy is to reserve pieces like these for serious buyers." John's calm demeanor broke when someone tried out our most expensive items. Richard looked at John several times, his sneer clear as day. "What makes you think I'm not serious?" Richard said in a cold voice. "I know who can afford what, and it's my job to keep this store honest. It's our brand, and we have a name to uphold." John got angry, but he kept his cool, and you know what? When you refuse to serve someone because you think they don't look good, you hurt your image. "Belong." Richard didn't change his face. "It's not personal, it's business. Our customers have certain expectations. I have no time to waste on individuals who are not serious buyers." John reduced his volume and approached the situation. "What number of serious buyers did you turn away because of assumptions? How many people did you treat badly because of your assumptions?" Richard's mouth tightened because he didn't think these customers were your type. "I run this store the way I see it," he said. He spoke sharply and honestly. "I don't have to explain myself to you." John held. Richard looked angry, even though he seemed calm. "You may not have to explain yourself to me," John said softly, "but you'll have to answer to someone. This is not only detrimental for business, it's also wrong in Richard's eyes." He looked uncertain for a moment, then his face hardened again. He said, "If you're dissatisfied with the procedures here," he said, "you're welcome to leave. There are a lot of other stores that might fit your tastes, John." He took a deep breath and stepped back. He looked at Sarah, who was watching the conversation with a worried face. John told Richard in a cold voice, "Thank you for your time. I'll make sure the right people know how you run your store." John then pivoted and exited the store. As he did, the doorbell seemed to ring louder than before. Once John got back out on the busy street, he knew what he had to do next. He had seen enough to know that Richard's John realized as he walked that the behavior wasn't just one incident. It was a way of thinking that required attention, a way his resolve became stronger. While he had initially hoped for a different outcome, he now firmly believed that change was necessary, and it was. Begin at the top. JN spent the night getting ready for what he had to do in the morning and didn't come back. Instead of going to the high-end shop, he went straight to the headquarters of his company, which is a sleek glass building in Midtown. Manhattan had a quiet atmosphere, with only a few phones ringing and people moving around deliberately. John walked through the halls and into the executive meeting room. It was a big room with a long, shiny table and plenty of room for everyone. The roof windows gave him a view of the city, and he sat down at the head of the table, his face calm but determined. Set up a meeting for Richard Coleman to come here to talk about the store's success and future plans. This was John's help. Lisa did what she could to make sure Richard showed up. Lisa stood by the door waiting for Richard to come in soon. Richard entered the room, his usual air of confidence enveloping him like a cloak. He was wearing a sharp suit, and his face was clean. He appeared both interested and slightly annoyed. He clearly believed they were calling him in for another act. Richard's steps slowed down a bit when he saw John. After looking at Lisa, he turned to John at the head of the table. His eyes were wide with surprise. JN couldn't put John in the right place, and confusion crossed his face. He kept quiet for a moment to let Richard speak. Take in the scene for a moment, and then he spoke. His voice was cool and authoritative, and he said, "Take a seat," pointing to a chair. Richard looked at Mr. Bennet across the table for a moment before pulling out a chair and sitting down. "Good morning, Mr. Bennet." Richard said, "I wasn't expecting to see you here. Is everything okay?" JN leaned forward a little. "Hold your gaze still. Richard, something is wrong. I'm here to discuss some serious concerns I have about your recent behavior." In the store, Richard's eyes flickered with confusion as he attempted to project his usual confident demeanor. He was worried about what I manage the store in the same manner as always. Sales are up and the brand's image is good. If there's a problem, I would be delighted to discuss it with you. John's face stayed the same. Sales numbers aren't changing. Richard, the issue lies in the way you handle people. I visited your store yesterday, but you didn't recognize me. Since I arrived as a regular customer dressed casually, Richard quickly realized what was going on and let out in a panicked moment. His mouth opened and closed as he tried to come up with an answer. John spoke before he could finish. "Listen," John said in a calm but firm voice. "I saw firsthand how you judge me based on how I look. You were rude and didn't provide the same level of service to someone you deemed deserving. I'm not just talking about how you treated me. This is about how you probably treat others." Richard took a deep breath and said, "Mr. Bennet, I didn't know it was you if I had a narrow view of who deserves respect. I knew John well enough to cut him off. That's the problem. Knowing someone's identity shouldn't be a prerequisite for treating them. This company stands for respect and inclusion. We built our brand on the idea that quality should be accessible to everyone. It's not just about being exclusive, but also about making people feel important. You've changed my shop into the exact opposite of what it used to be." Richard moved around in his seat, making it clear that he was unhappy. "I was just trying to keep the brand's image up. Our establishment is exclusive and high-end, catering to a specific vibe and customer type." John's voice got rougher. "Any customer, no matter what they wear or how they look, expects excellent items and polite service. You don't deserve to feel judged. Your behavior hurts everything about this." Richard's face appeared to be a mask of panic. "Please allow me to make a change, Mr. Bennet." John slowly shook his head. "That's too late. Now I'll do better. I'll do whatever training you need." "You can't change the way you feel about things, Richard. There is a fundamental issue with your perspective. I am immediately terminating your franchise agreement due to my dissatisfaction with the conduct of those individuals. Are you no longer in charge of that store?" Richard was shocked. "You can't be serious. I've been dealing with this for a while. I worked for that store for years and helped it build a successful name. You can't just cut me off like that, John." Never deviating from Richard's "yes, I can and will" response, your actions reveal your thoughts on the situation. "I won't let one person's biases ruin what we've built for the company as a whole. Security will lead you out. We will explain the firing process and the subsequent steps to you." Richard also stood up, his face filled with confusion. "You are making a significant error. I am the most exceptional supervisor this organization has ever had, and you will experience regret as a result." This JN kept his cool and said, "No, Richard, the mistake was letting you. To stay in a job where you could hurt the company's ideals, I won't feel guilty about ensuring that my stores operate in accordance. Some individuals truly understand the values this brand represents." Richard looked at John for a moment, then quickly turned around, and he stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of sound in the hallway. Observing his departure, John experienced a sense of resolution. Not only was Richard fired, his company's integrity was at stake. John made sure that every customer felt important and honored. He then looked at Lisa, who had been quietly watching the whole thing. "Make sure to lead Richard out and start the transfer process right away. Bennett, I'll take care of it." John walked over to the window and looked out over the city. Today he had to do something important. It would take more work and changes to make sure that every store that carried his name lived up to the values he held dear. At first, John felt calm. It was clear that honesty and respect would always come first. Standing at the office window, I gazed out over the bustling streets of New York City. The meeting was underway. John knew that firing Richard was the right thing to do, but the sense of closure didn't make him happy. Although it was necessary, it was just one aspect of a larger issue. As he turned away from the window, his phone rang. It was a message. Sarah Moore, the assistant manager of the store, promised to meet him at the offices to discuss the future of the store. John walked down. Sarah was waiting in the hallway leading to the meeting room. When he walked in, she quickly stood up, looking tense. She wore a simple shirt and skirt, her brown hair pulled back into a neat bun. She had a mixture of emotions in her eyes. Worry and hope. John gave her a comforting smile and said, "Thank you for coming." Sarah J.N. pointed for her to sit down. "I know it's been a stressful few days." Sarah nodded, her hands clasping and unclasping in her lap to say, "Yes, Mr. Bennett." "I heard what happened with Richard. The staff is talking about how scared they are about what's going to happen. What was the status of the store?" John sat down next to her and said, "I get it. That's why I wanted to talk to you. Going away was beneficial for the business, but I know it leaves a lot of questions. I want to make sure going forward the store is in excellent hands." Sarah nodded, her face serious. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I did my best at work, but Richard got in the way, and it was challenging to find my groove. It didn't always match up with what I thought was right." John carefully watched her. "I saw how you handled yourself. Sarah, you were very professional in the shop, even when things got tense. That's why I'd like to offer you an award for acting managers. You know the staff, you know the store, and I think you know what this brand stands for." This translates to Sarah's eyes growing bigger in shock and happiness. "Mr. Bennett, I'm struggling to find the right words," the manager reiterated. "I never expected this." John smiled and said, You need to assist me in ensuring that the store reflects our values. I need someone I can trust. To guide someone who won't make the same mistakes Richard did is my goal." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she nodded in agreement. "Bennett, I'll do it. I'll do anything to make the store what it should be. I've always believed in treating people well. No matter what, treat every person with respect." John's face softened. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. You have my full backing, and we'll work together to make the changes I want you to feel able to make." Sarah looked at any problems to make sure that every customer felt welcome and important. "Thankful for Mr. Bennett's help. I've always cared about the shop and the people who work there. I felt empowered to effect change." John concurred, saying, "You are empowered now, and I'll ensure you have the necessary tools. We should begin by providing new training in customer service to all of our staff. Everyone who walks into that shop, even if they're just looking to buy a $10,000 watch, should feel like they belong." Sarah seemed more sure of herself as they talked. "I can do that. I know the staff will respond well. All they need to know is that NIM values their work and is a good place to work." John leaned back in his chair and felt a sense of happiness he hadn't had in a while. "Okay, I'll be checking in," he said. "I check in on you often, but I trust you to handle things in the shop. We're all in this together, Sarah. It's not just about making money, It's about building a community where everyone feels welcome and respected. Sarah smiled. I won't let you down, Mr. Bennett. I'll make sure the store shows off the best of what your name stands for. Stands for John stood up and offered his hand. I know you will, so thank you for taking the lead. Sarah shook his hand strongly, a new sense of purpose in her eyes as she thought about the beneficial things you'd do. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. As Sarah exited the meeting room, John felt a surge of excitement, feeling of hope. The last few days have been hard, but they have also sparked important changes. However, he was aware that there remained additional tasks to complete. He had to visit more shops and meet more managers. But today was a step in the right direction. Right away, John went back to his office and looked out over the city again. He thought about the people who, every day, new people with their own stories, goals and dreams came through his store's doors. He built his business on the idea that everyone, no matter who they were, should be treated with respect, and today John took actions to ensure the preservation of that conviction. As the sun went down, John felt a quiet sense of pride. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a leader, and it was his duty to use his power for good. Because of people like Sarah, he knew that his shops would continue to do well, not just as high-end places to shop, but also as places where John immediately implemented changes the day after Richard's termination. At the store, he set up a meeting with the staff to talk about the new direction and comfort them. Despite the sudden change in management, he was confident that their jobs were safe and valued. He knew that security and clearance communication would be crucial as the store transformed into a space that embodied the brand's values. For the sake of respect and openness, the meeting took place in a private conference room at the company's main office. In a room that was just as fancy as the one where John had faced Richard, the staff pressed a mix of Sarah Moore stood in front of JN with a clipboard in her hand, looking more sure of herself than she had before. The day before, John stood up and told the room, "Thank you all for coming." He started his speech by saying, "Calm down. I know the last few days have been hard, and I want to be honest with you about what's going on, Richard. Coleman has left the company. His leaving was required to bring our store's operations in line with our values. The brand stands for." There was a stir in the room, and John could see the doubt and questions in their eyes. He looked at as many as possible, wondering what this meant for their store futures. "As many as I can. We appreciate your work and none of your jobs are in danger. We will be making some changes, though, to make sure that our store is a friendly place for everyone. No matter their appearance, this is about getting to know them and making sales. Respecting everyone who comes through our doors." Sarah spoke up. Her voice was steady. As the new interim manager, I'll be in charge of these activities with my team. We'll be focusing on training our employees in customer service, and to ensure we all know what to do, I'll work closely with you. It's not about blaming each other. It's about getting better at working together and dealing with people. James, a young guy, raised his hand and asked, "What exactly does this training involve? How long does it last?" John nodded at Sarah, who replied that the training would cover everything, from how to greet guests to how to deal. It will include workshops on cultural understanding and acceptance. The goal is to ensure everyone feels equipped to provide the best service possible. We will begin with a series of brief lessons over the next few days. They will be training for another few weeks and all year long. James nodded, as if he understood. An older worker named Lisa spoke up. "What do we do if we see behavior that doesn't match these values? We'll provide you with a straightforward explanation." Sarah John stated, "Yes, you can tell Sarah about any problems, and you can also come. Please talk to me directly. My door is always open. We take these issues very seriously, and I want you to know, as we work to create a culture of respect and responsibility, we want everyone to feel safe and able to speak out. Begins with all of us." The staff nodded, and John could feel a change in the room. The tension was dissipating, and it was replaced with a guarded optimism. They weren't just hearing about changes, they were making them. This was crucial to building trust. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" John scanned the room and approached a young woman named Claire. She, who worked as a cashier, raised her hand. "What should we do if customers arrive with an attitude similar to Richard's?" Sarah answered, "That's a great question, Claire. It can be challenging when people behave rudely or unfairly. Part of our training will include ways to calm down and end a fight if you ever feel. If a customer is acting badly or making you feel uncomfortable, don't be afraid to talk to a boss. We want you to feel you have the authority to manage matters effectively, but we are also available to assist you." JN agreed. "Remember that you're not alone in this. We're a team, and we'll work together to make sure that everyone, including staff, feels valued." Both the staff and the customers appeared to calm down, and the clear plan and assistance offered seemed to comfort them even more. He felt better. He knew these changes wouldn't fix all of his problems right away, but they were a start. Everyone had to work together to make the store feel welcome and important. "Thank you all for your time," John said as the meeting ended. "I have faith in all of you," he said. The staff started to say, "Let's work together to make this store a model of what our brand stands for." As they leave, some pause to quickly ask Sarah a few questions, while others return to their work with a renewed sense of purpose. John watched them leave, hoping that he had made the right choice by promoting Sarah. She was all ready. She demonstrated leadership traits that Richard lacked, and it was evident that she had a strong bond with the staff. John looked at Sarah and said, "You did well today." He then informed Sarah that the staff respects her and looks up to her. Sarah smiled, looking both relieved and determined. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I won't stop," she said. "I'm sorry I let you down. I think we can really make a difference here." John agreed. "I know you will. I'll be checking in often. However, I trust you to handle things. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me." Sarah agreed, and John left the room. His mind was already preoccupied with the next steps in the meeting room. He was required to visit other shops and meet with other managers. The problem with Richard had been a wake-up call, a reminder that people with the best motives can make things worse. Poor leadership and bias made John feel worse as he walked through the halls of his offices. The fight with Richard was tough, but it was necessary. Justice wasn't just about striking people. The goal was to establish an environment that did not tolerate such behavior. JN was dedicated to creating honor, fairness, and honesty were more than just words at this company. The mission statement outlined the rules that every action and choice must adhere to. John knew there would be challenges, but he was serious about his work and prepared to overcome them. He was sure they could make a real and lasting difference because of their beliefs and the help of leaders like Sarah. There were already signs of change in the store. It felt lighter, and the staff was more friendly and interested in helping customers. They made the right choice by appointing Sarah as temporary manager. She ran the training sessions well, and the team replied positively, eager to make the workplace more welcoming and respectful. JN had kept his word. Check in often. Today he chose to drop by without warning to see how things were going as he entered the store. The familiar chime above the door rang, and James, the salesperson, greeted him right away. He had raised concerns during the staff meeting. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett James," he said with a smile. "It's great to see you." "Good morning, James," John said, shaking James's hand. "How's everything going?" James enthusiastically answered. The training sessions have been good, and Sarah has been doing a fantastic job. Everyone on the team feels better. Our guests and I agree on how to treat them." John smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted. Keep up the excellent work. I'm proud of how you've all handled this change as Jonathan has moved in." At the store, he saw that customers were being met warmly, employees were willing to help, and there was a general air of unlike his first visit when Richard was present. He felt positive. JN ventured to the back of the store and discovered a charge. He felt positive about seeing his idea come true. Sarah was talking to a customer when she looked up and saw John. She said, "Mr. Bennett, it's nice to see you," Sarah said with a smile. "You too, Sarah." John said, "I just stopped by to see how things were going. It looks like you did a fantastic job, FC." Sarah was so proud. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. The team has been great. They have truly embraced the changes, and our customers are providing positive feedback. I think we're on the right track." John concurred. "Progress, and I'll keep helping you in any way I can." The sound of the John turned around when the doorbell rang loudly and saw Richard Coleman standing at the door. Richard's clothing wasn't as clean as John's. His face was filled with worry, and he glanced around the store until he spotted John. John's face turned a little serious. He hadn't expected to see Richard here, especially after they had been together. In their last meeting, Richard walked over to them, but his steps were slower than normal, and he didn't look as sure of himself. Richard began to almost beg, "I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I need to talk to you. Please wait a minute." John's face stayed blank. He looked at Sarah, who looked surprised but didn't move. Then there was silence. John turned back to Richard and said, "All right, Richard. Coolly, you have a moment. What do you want to say?" Richard took a deep breath and sagged his shoulders. "I came to apologize," he said. Vaughn said, "I know I was. Now that I've had time to think about what I did, I see that I was wrong. I make a mistake by rating people unfairly, allowing my biases to get in the way. As part of my job, I'm truly sorry, Mr. Bennett." JN heard without speaking up. Richard's eyes were pleading, and his voice was thick with despair. "I've been with the company," he said. Richard said over and over, "I care about the company and about the store. Please allow me another opportunity to demonstrate my ability to manage the store according to your preferences. I'll do anything." John didn't say anything for a moment while Richard's words hung in the air. He thought about how many times, given the way Richard treated JN, it's likely that he rejected people based solely on their appearance. Richard's sudden desperation seemed to drive the change of heart more than genuine regret. "Thank you for your apology, Richard John." He finally spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't just about one mistake. It's about a pattern of behavior and a way of thinking that you've shown for years. What I saw in the store wasn't just a mistake. It was the result of Richard's deep-seated attitude doesn't align with our standards." Richard's face fell, and his eyes filled with anger and sadness. Mr. Bennett, in despair, pleaded, "Please help me learn and change. I'll prove to you that I truly own the store." JN slowly shook his head. "Richard, the choice has been made. The store is doing. Sarah has done a fantastic job as boss, and the staff has responded well to the changes. I can't go back to the way things were. I fulfilled my responsibilities to the business and each customer who visited. Allowing you to return through those doors would destroy everything we've worked for." Richard's shoulders. He slouched and gazed at John, his last hope waning. He appeared desperate and on the verge of giving up, and his words resonated with me. I thought to myself that JK's voice might have gotten a little softer. "Richard, I hope you understand this. Chance to think and grow. This isn't about punishment. It's about making sure the right people are in charge." to stay true to the brand's ideals. I wish you the best in everything you do from now on, but you won't be getting this store back." Richard gave a sad nod and said, "Thank you for your time, Mr. Bennett." He didn't say anything else as he turned around. He walked out of the store with heavy steps. JN observed his departure, sympathizing with him and easing Richard's concerns. The damage had already occurred, and John couldn't jeopardize the integrity of his brand. Sarah stood up for Richard because he owed it to his company, his workers, and his customers to give him another chance. Her face showed relief as she stood next to John and said, "Thank you for not letting him come back." If he had done so, the staff would have expressed concern. John agreed. "I made my choice based on what's best for the people and the shop. Sarah, you and everyone else who works here have done a fantastic job. Keep it up. We're making something great, and I'm grateful." As Sarah smiled, a sense of success lit up her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I won't," she said. John looked around the shop and watched as the staff talked to customers. Each interaction was a positive one. John felt a sense of pride and happiness because he knew the change was real and making a difference. Things would get tough, but with strong leadership and a dedication to the company's ideals, those tough times would pass. As John left the shop, he felt like he had a renewed sense of purpose. This was why he had worked so hard to build a brand. More than wealth, it represented honor, honesty, and community. With the right people in place, he was sure the goal would continue to do well.